Really recently, I made a video about the Blackmagic Pocket 6K and my opinion if this is still a great buy in 2021. And sure enough, Blackmagic just updated the Blackmagic Pocket 6K not only 2 weeks later. So in this video, I want to give you my opinion about these changes and if I think that they actually make a big difference, especially in regard to the video I just uploaded 2 weeks ago, because I did have some beef with the original Blackmagic Pocket 6K and they might have actually changed some of those. So without further ado, my name is Damien Cooper and welcome to Monkey Fixes. So the first thing I found really funny is when he started to talk about the new Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro version is that he mentioned the design and that everybody loved the design, so they just wanted to add a little bit more features from their Ursa Mini Pro line. And who does he really talk to and where does he get his information from? Because me and pretty much everyone else that I have talked to in the past really hates the design. And everybody was really looking forward to somewhat of a box cube design like the Red Komodo or a Z-Cam, and we didn't really get that. Instead, we got a bigger body. It's basically the same design, just everything is a little bit bigger and clunkier and now kinda resembles a C70. But other than that, not a lot has changed. There are some smaller design changes to the body though, so let's start talking about those now. The biggest design change is probably the articulating screen on the back. And he didn't mention anything about the screen being brighter now, so me personally that is something that I don't care too much for, but a lot of people who like shooting handheld without rigging out the camera would actually love having the articulating screen for better viewing angles. Me personally, I always use an external monitor anyway, so for me that it really doesn't change anything because the original monitor wasn't really bright enough to pull focus reliably, so for me this isn't really a big change, but still overall a welcome one. The next big change, and that is probably the biggest one for all of us, is internal ND filters. And in my original video I really complained about the ND filter situation with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K because it is missing an infrared cut filter. And here it really becomes a hassle sometimes when working with ND filters, because you really have to choose wisely and you actually get some mixed results when using ND filters opposed to not using ones because of that. And with those internal ND filters on the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro version, that might actually be a thing of the past. Unfortunately, we didn't really get a lot of information about those ND filters other than you can control them from the back of the camera. But he didn't really say how many stops you get, if there are variable ND filters, and he didn't really address the whole infrared cut filter situation either. But overall, I believe that this will be a really big game changer for the Blackmagic Pocket 6K community out there, and I think that this is probably one of the biggest changes that they made to the camera. There's also a tiny change on the body that I noticed, and that is that we now have 2 mounting points on the bottom instead of 1 before. For me this really isn't a big deal because I would use a cage with it anyway, but for everyone who doesn't really want to rig out the camera, you now have more secure mounting points to a tripod plate, so that's a cool thing. The next change is somewhat of an odd one, because now instead of 1 mini XLR port, you have 2. And I don't really care for that too much because I would always record externally because the original preamps of the Blackmagic Pocket 6K weren't really the best one in the first place. So if you want to use them, I would highly suggest just to use them for scratch audio, and then you pretty much only need one anyway. I think they should have just leave it with 1 mini XLR port and instead put an SDI port on the camera, because that is also one thing that I really complained about the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, especially when using it in a professional environment or a live streaming environment. I was really missing that SDI port, so I think they could have just gone for an SDI port instead. The next thing they changed is that you now have a viewfinder support, and that one comes in at $500. And I personally, I don't care for viewfinders at all, but that is just my shooting style. And actually back when I had the Canon C200, the first thing I did was get rid of that viewfinder because I never ever used it. So for me this is something that I really don't care for, but maybe you're different and that is actually a welcome addition to the camera for you. For me personally, I would never buy this anyway. And now, aside from the internal ND filters, here is the most welcomed and biggest change to the body of the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro version, and that is the battery slot. So now, instead of using the Canon LPE6 batteries, you can now use Sony NP-F batteries. To be a little bit more precise, you can now use the Canon NP-F570 batteries. And just to compare the two with each other, the Canon LPE6 batteries feature about 14 watt hours, and when you use the new Canon LPE6N batteries from the Canon R5 and R6, you actually go up to 16 watt hours. With the Sony batteries, depending on which model you actually get, you can get up to 24-hour watt batteries. So that is actually a decent change and is also almost twice as many watt hours than you had on the Canon batteries before. But an even bigger hope is that the camera is more compatible with the Sony batteries opposed to the Canon batteries. Because Canon batteries obviously play along nicely with Canon cameras, but not really with other cameras. And the Sony NP-F style batteries are more used in a broad environment for different cameras, lights, or other accessories. So the compatibility might actually be better with the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro, and now we can actually make use of the full spectrum of the battery, because there was definitely a big problem with the old Blackmagic Pocket 6K, because it wasn't really just the sheer amount of battery life you had left on the Canon batteries, but that they didn't just play along nicely, because sometimes the camera just shut off at 30% or 15%, and sometimes it went down all the way to 1%. So overall, this is definitely a really big change, and for my kind of shooting, this might actually be enough to use this camera in a production setting, because when I need continuous power, I just plug it into the DC charger, and when I just have some B-roll shoots, I would actually use them with the internal battery, but we'll have to see how long these batteries actually really last in a real life situation. For everyone who needs even more juice, they also came out with a new battery grip solution, and he said in the live stream that he is now running the camera with 3 of those batteries. I don't really know how that works, because I thought that it would be only 2 batteries in the battery grip, but apparently now you can actually power the camera with 3 batteries, and that should definitely be plenty enough for everyone out there. Unfortunately, that makes the camera even bigger, clunkier, and even more awkward to shoot with than it already is. And another thing that I was missing about this solution is that you have no way of powering an external monitor or an external accessory like a wireless HDMI transmitter, and that would be something that I would really love when having this opposed to these internal battery solutions. And the last thing they changed is the color science. And not only the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro version, but also the Blackmagic Pocket 4K and 6K will get this upgrade for free. And now all of the existing cameras have Gen 5 color science instead of Gen 4 like they had before. And that is also really cool. I personally haven't worked with Gen 5 color science yet, but I complained about the color science of the Blackmagic Pocket 6K in my video a little bit, because sometimes I get really great colors out of it and sometimes I just didn't. So the color science for me was a little bit inconsistent, and that might have actually changed with the implementation of the Gen 5 color science. They're also bringing out a free software update to all the existing cameras, the 4K to 6K and the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro, where they introduce something like RGB parades, for example, and that is totally free, but you will have to wait a month for this to actually be released. So what's my overall verdict and my opinion of the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro? I think it's actually a great addition, and there's a lot of really welcome changes here. I think they could have gone with a better form factor, and I think they could have also made some bigger changes like an SDI out, for example, but overall I think that what they changed actually might be a game changer here. And although he said on the stream that this isn't really there to replace the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, I would highly recommend for everyone who's buying a new camera to get the Pro version and spend the $500 more instead of getting the 6K, because those advantages that the 6K Pro has over the original 6K are huge. The internal ND filters, the new color science, the new battery solution, those are things that are well worth way more than $500 in my opinion, so I would suggest going for the 6K Pro version, but of course I will have to find out when I'm actually using the camera in a real world scenario, so if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe, turn on the notifications to get notified when I will actually get the camera and will be able to use this in the field. And well, if you like this video, give it a like, and also make sure to check out our Blackmagic Pocket 6K and 4K LUT packs that we have on our website. We have 2 for those, and that is how I graded all of our Blackmagic Pocket 6K footage. And now that's it, and I hope to see you on the next one.